And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to be focusing on playoff Jimmy Butler. Now, Jimmy Butler, he's a fan favorite for a lot of people in the NBA, mainly because of his alter ego, Playoff Jimmy. And I call it an alter ego because that's what a lot of people like. They really call him that, but does he really live up to that hype? I don't think so. And I bring this up because on February 24th, I remember Jimmy Butler. He said, "It's that time." And when he says it's that time, he's sort of implying that like it's time for the Heat to sort of make their surge into the playoffs and become one of the best teams going into the playoffs and go on a crazy run like they usually do. Like, for example, in the bubble in 2020, when Jimmy Butler was on the Miami Heat, he shockingly, he beat the Bucks he beat the Bucks in 5 games, I believe. Obviously, Giannis got hurt in that series, so not really fair to judge, but he ended up beating the Bucks, which were the best team in the Eastern Conference, and they were expected to make the finals, but it turned out Miami Heat were the team that ended up making the finals. They still lost. And then the next year, they lose to the Bucks. They actually got swept by the Bucks the next year. But then after that, like last year in 2022, they ended up beating the Bucks as an 8th seed with Jimmy Butler playing some of his best basketball. And ever since then, there's been nothing but hype around Jimmy Butler. It's been, oh, playoff Jimmy. Oh my God, he's a demon in the playoffs. He becomes a different animal. He's got that dog in him. All those kinds of comments they've been going around with Jimmy Butler. And it's sort of like expected that like Jimmy Butler performs in the postseason. But does he really perform in the postseason? And regardless, now in this regular season, against top 5 teams, the Miami Heat are 0-11. And obviously, that doesn't sound like playoff Jimmy to me. That's not, I understand it's not the playoffs right now, but I just don't believe in him. I don't believe it's a thing. I'm going to look at the box scores real quick and I'll bring up the recent series. I'll bring up last year just because that last year is a big reason as to why I don't think playoff Jimmy is a thing. So obviously you don't have that persona unless you just elevate your game to ridiculous degrees in the postseason. That's sort of what's expected. When you look at playoff P, right now it's a bit of a joke, but playoff P was sort of expected to be better in the playoffs than he is in the regular season. But when you look at the numbers, playoff Jimmy is not too far off from regular season Jimmy. Looking at his field goal percentage, he ended up averaging 21 points per game in the finals. With going 41% from the field, not that efficient, and 36% from 3, pretty efficient. But it's not so much the averages that have me worried. It's the individual games in this last playoff series that have me worried. In the final elimination game, in Game 5, Jimmy Butler shot 5 of 18. I'm sorry, that doesn't sound like playoff Jimmy Butler to me. From how the media perceives playoff Jimmy Butler, this other monster that just outplays everybody in the playoffs, that's not outplaying everybody. I'm sorry. 5 of 18 from the field, that is not it. And in the game before that, he ended up going 9 of 17 from the field. This is with him averaging 45 plus minutes, by the way. 40 plus minutes. This is him playing 40 minutes. And he's only able to get this many points and shoot this badly. And he ended the game with a box plus minus of 9 and a minus 9. And he also ended game 3 with minus 11 box scores. And he ended game 1 minus 17. And in game 1 of that finals, he only scored 13 points. Now, obviously, like it is a little bit unfair to judging one series. So, okay, let's go ahead and look at the series before that, going into the series. So, he did average 24 points, but notice how his performance got worse in the finals. Now, when he was in the Western Conference Finals, he averaged 24 points per game, shot 34% from three, and 42% from the field. It's okay, but again, not playoff Jimmy material. In Game 6, in the game where they ended up losing off of a Derek White buzzer beater, he shot 5 of 21. That is not ideal for like a playoff monster. And he has these kinds of performances way too often. He is not consistent in the postseason. Now, in the series before that, this was when he was actually averaging a lot better numbers like overall. He averaged 24 points on 43% from the field, but he only shot 11% from 3. What? Like, that's not playoff Jimmy Butler. I'm sorry, that is not. And in the elimination game, he shot 7 for 22 from the field for 24 points. He's lucky that he was able to win, but 7 for 22 in an elimination game? That's playoff Jimmy Butler? And then, obviously, like, in the first round of against Milwaukee, he absolutely dominated. And that's sort of been the only time where he's played very well. He's only played very well in the first round, and this happens every single time, every single season. And we can go ahead and even look at the rest of the series afterwards, looking at 2022 when he was in the playoffs. Yes, he did score 41 in that first game, but then in games 3 and 4, he ended up scoring only 8 points and 6 points. And then in the game after that, in game 5, he ended up scoring 13 points. I'm sorry, but that is not playoff Jimmy Butler. That is not someone who elevates their game in the playoffs. Like, imagine if that was LeBron. Imagine if that was LeBron putting up those stinker performances in incredibly close games. He would never live it down. Nobody would ever let him live it down. And that's something that, like, Jimmy Butler sort of benefits from that. Like, he doesn't have to worry about the media criticizing him, because the media doesn't criticize him whatsoever. Like, people still think he's playoff Jimmy Butler, and the media still puts him, like, as one of the best playoff performers in the NBA. So he doesn't even with the stinker performances that he's had, he doesn't have to worry about people thinking that he's bad in the postseason, because nobody thinks that. And I don't understand why, because it's like, why are they giving Jimmy Butler all the leeway, but they don't give players like LeBron James all that leeway? It does not make any sense. Now, going on to the rest of the playoff series, like, that's sort of been like the main that's my main problem with Jimmy Butler. He always has like these stinker performances, but people still call him playoff Jimmy Butler, and I don't understand why, because he's not all that in the postseason. All of his numbers going from first round, second round to third round, they all have gotten worse as he progresses into the postseason. That is not someone who deserves playoff in front of their name. Like, that's just not it. When you have playoff in front of your name, you have to perform and you have to get better as the lights get brighter. That's the expectation. And again, maybe I'm a little bit harsh, but regardless, like, that's the expectation that's like expected of Jimmy Butler and is expected of a lot of these players going into this league. Going into the postseason, excuse me. And again, it's the individual meltdowns that happen. I mean, if Harden had these individual meltdowns, like, we would be seeing a lot of people like disrespecting Harden, but he doesn't have those individual meltdowns. Well, he does have those individual meltdowns, and he has them a lot, but we don't see that for Jimmy Butler. We really don't see that for Jimmy Butler at all. And I don't understand why, because, like, why does Jimmy Butler get all the leeway to do what he wants, but other players, they don't get the leeway to like play bad in the postseason. It doesn't make any sense, and they don't even talk about it when he was playing bad, and I don't understand why. And a lot of the points that came in from Jimmy Butler in Game 5, while he did have 21, they were garbage time points. And I'm sorry, I just cannot get behind playoff Jimmy Butler. I think he is a myth. I think he's like, there's nothing good about him. And only in the first round. He's real in the first round, but like, does that really say much, being that you're a good player in the first round? I don't really think it does. But I digress. With that, that's the end of the show segment, and that is the final segment of the show. So thank you for tuning into the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. Thank you once again. And before I end off this segment, I'd like to remind everybody to please use the link in the description or the link below the ticker on every show segment. That is gsmcpodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive, puts your comments directly in front of my screen. That's the end of the show segment. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go.